old's your cat? If you
How
had,
how heavy is my cat is the
oh,
question.
oh, there you go.
He's going to be 7 because my girlfriend just told me that.
Okay, that's
So
pretty awesome.
he's close to 7.
My cat is like, or our cat, my son's cat is like two. She's started going outside all the time, and so she kills everything. So she's currently she leaves me offerings every morning.
So she brings you back the victory spoils.
The victory spoils come back. She brought me a blue jay the other day. She was very proud of that one because it was half her size. Um, and
Now,
yeah,
Jake, I'm pretty sure you're vegan. Is this true?
I'm vegetarian, but you know,
Okay.
it's hey, what do you? This is the cycle of life out here in the woods. You know,
The
this is
the law of natural order.
the law of natural order. You know, they're not dealing with processed foods. They're cats and animals, and they're going to do what they're going to do. I sort of had to have that conversation with the kids when they got the cat. It's just like, she's gonna kill stuff. This is what cats do if she, chooses to go outside. I do worry about her getting picked off by something, to be honest, because we have a lot of hawks and eagles out here, a lot of coyotes. There's there's some like there's been some talks of some big cats out there, but I've never seen it. And we have fisher cats, which are not a cat, but they're out there too, and they'll take a proper, domesticated cat if they feel like it. But she's been staying out all night. She goes out and she hunts until 4 or 5 in the morning, and then I hear her wanting to come in. I let her in, and she usually brings me something.
Completely different world. I live right in the city,
Yeah,
and my cat is so lazy that if he went outside for an hour, he'd probably get
I couldn't handle it.
yeah, he'd either get scooped up or call home. He'd phone home to get picked up.
Yeah. So, well, man, and now my dog is chasing somebody off the property. She's saying something to somebody. She'll let him know. Yeah, the dog. So the dog also. So we live basically in the 80s in the town that we live in here. Okay, where there's no leash law in our town. Um, so dogs are free to roam and do whatever they want. So at time I've been coming back from a like a show or a tour, at odd hours in the middle of the night or whatever, and like driving down the road, and there'll be like, 3 or 4 dogs just like walking down the side of the street, um,
Chilling.
chilling, doing their thing. They're just making their rounds. This is what they do. They probably have a route that they take, and they kind of go and do whatever they do, and they come back. Um, but my dog, she will not leave the perimeter. But she got kicked by a horse last year, and
Jesus.
yeah, she was really lucky. She got it broke her jaw a little, like she had a fractured jaw and had some other stuff going on from it, but she was pulling away from the horse when she got kicked. So she really lucked out, and she didn't die. But now she's respectful of boundary lines. At that point, I already had her trained on a remote. Since she can wander, I have a remote that buzzes her, and so if she was like, a couple hundred yards away, and I could see her, I could hit the remote and just hit buzz buzz, and then she comes running back, and she knows to come back. But now she just will wear the collar all the time and just um, thinks it's on even when it's not, so she won't leave the perimeter. She's already kind of learned her lesson now.
Technology used in a good way.
In a good way. I was apprehensive about it at first because I was like, am I going to torture my dog? But I worked with a trainer for a while with her, and it seemed like the best solution for our situation here. And because kids leave doors open constantly, animals go in and out. Like there's not much you can do about that. So it was the lesser of evils, and it's worked out pretty good so far. But yeah, she's a protector, so she's gonna go take care of business out there. So how have you been, Scott? What's been going on with you?
Uh, the usual. Nothing. I'm good.
You're
Nothing.
good.
Nothing bad to report. Just busy. We play more shows than anyone ever should. Hey,
Yeah,
I want to hijack the podcast though and say
yeah,
something
let's
to
do it.
you.
Okay.
I've been hearing from so many people how much they love your new record, so that must feel really good for you. So, in a generic way, super congratulations because you're in a position like Terror, like even older than us. So to still be able to get people hyped at this part of your dumb word career, that's really
Sure.
exciting. So congrats, guy. And you guys are such nice people. That makes me happy.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. As a guy making music and art, I try not to look at any press, right, or any sort of feedback with anything, because I always feel, well, I feel that it could potentially affect the direction of things, right? I want things to be as pure as possible from the initial vision to when we get it out into the world and we lose ownership of it. So I try not to like look at feedback because I don't want it to sort of seep into my thoughts like smoke going through a door, and then like start thinking about the way I write or the way I do things and do it uh, for reasons just to appease others in some way. It means a lot to me when a peer shares something like you did, saying just like, congratulations on that. Because like I don't, I try to stay in the bubble,
Right. This is direct feedback from people I know. So,
for sure. Well, I appreciate that. Well, we worked really hard on it. And we worked really hard and it was really, I mean, the deal with any record, it's totally immersive when you're in it, and then when you're kind of done or at least like kind of rounding third base on the project, you don't even you've given so much of yourself to it, you don't know if it's good anymore by even your own basic standards. It's just really hard to kind of get out of your own way. So it means a lot to hear that. I appreciate that. But I want to talk
Man.
about you. I want to talk to you. I know we talk about everything, but um, I don't know. I've known you forever. When did we meet?
Mm.
I was trying to think about that this morning. When did it? It
I,
was
let
probably
me lay this one on you. This
okay.
might be a fact. I don't think we met here, but I think the first time I saw Converge was at a New Bedford Fest. Did you play? I was at two of those. That
Yeah,
mu-
we played. I think we played one or two of them. I definitely know we played one of them. We may have played two of them. And at that time, this would have been before Buried Alive for you. So it would have been Slugfest time.
I was actually playing drums, if you can believe that, in a band called Fadaway that played the
Oh,
New
you were in Fade.
Bedford
Okay,
Fest.
I remember Fade Away. Wasn't Fade Away? Didn't Fade Away have a really tall vocalist?
No, no, no,
Oh,
no,
who was
no,
that? That was
no,
somebody around
no.
that time too. Oh no, I'm confusing it with a
Envy, maybe. Maybe
yes, I'm
Envy?
thinking of Envy from because there was a band like that was like from Ohio or that area that we played with that was in the same sort of or similar sort of sub genre thing that was going on at the time. But okay, so you were playing in Fadeaway at the time. All right, that's interesting.
Maybe we
So
met at like a crazy fest or
yeah, maybe
through Ian Larrabee. Who knows? Who
I
knows?
I
Or
definitely
at a
know
Pearl Street.
socially Ian is for sure the tie because you two became really tight traveling together doing Buried Alive and Reach a Sky shows. And we knew Ian really well because I knew Ian from Reason Enough before Reach the Sky when he joined that band. And I believe he may have replaced Sick Rick at the time, who was in the Bruisers and things, and he was in that band. I think he replaced him or something like that. But anyway, um, yeah. So like I know socially that was kind of our tie. And I think that was in the early 2000s. Like our paths started to cross kind of a lot when Buried Alive started doing a lot more shows outside of the Buffalo area. And like, I know, I remember like being in like DC with you for some reason.
Yep. Yep. I was just going to bring that up. We played a really hot church in DC. Matt Pike might have been the link, if not Ian, Mr. Pike.
Yep, for sure. No, that's so crazy. No, my memory is spotty with certain things, but that era I remember a lot, probably because I didn't have as much in my brain as I do now, right? It's kind of how it works.
Right, right.
But yeah, no, I do remember those shows. I remember maybe it was an EVR showcase or around that time. It was like I know we played that church or something down there a few or hall or whatever a couple times. I remember you were at one of those. But like our first Buffalo shows were, I think our first Buffalo show Converge played was with maybe Acrid or one of those bands, or like I know we
Hmm.
did a Dead Guy. We played with Dead Guy and Coalesce um in the late 90s there, but I did not meet you there, but I met other Buried Alive people at the time.
That show to me sounds like you, Dead Guy, and Coalesce like birthed somehow, some way that birthed Every Time I Die, because that's probably like the formation of when they started like all their favorite bands at once.
I mean, there's probably a connection there in some way, and that's probably when we started meeting those guys too, right? Because yeah, that was. I remember playing with them really early on when they first started at a small place in Buffalo as well. Yeah, total trip. So
Where
yeah,
what
oh, go ahead.
sorry.
No,
Was the Dead Guy show, is that a floor show? Like in a hall?
yeah, it was a floor show,
Okay.
and I remember somebody from Snapcase was there. It was a pretty well attended show. It was the second version of Dead Guy, who was
Oh,
kind of
really? Okay. No
yeah.
Tim Singer.
No, it was after the initial split. I don't know. I don't think they released that Victory EP yet, or they maybe were just about to. But yeah, it was that version of the band, which they were. It was good too. It was just a different thing. Because I was very loyal, especially to Keith as a songwriter. So when Keith and Tim left to do Kiss It Goodbye, I sort of followed Kiss It Goodbye as a listener more than Dead Guy at the time. But they were still potent. They were still doing their thing, and that was one of our first experiences with Coalesce. Actually, I believe that tour, or let's just call it, I'm calling it a tour, but it was like probably like three shows. I think that was the same one that brought us to CB's for the first time as well.
Look
Um,
at all these beautiful things we got to do.
I
These
know,
people get to do, get to see, get to meet. Oh, what a
I know,
world.
I know, right? Hey, what was the first time you got to go to CB's and experience CB's?
Huh.
You ever thought about that? I I,
It,
I don't know.
I don't think Despair played there.
Okay.
No, maybe, Hatebreed and Despair did that whole tour. There's a chance it hit there. I know I went there with True Blue when Kitzel came
Yeah,
over here with True Blue. They
sure.
played CBGBs and I was there as a roadie.
Okay.
Terror definitely played CBGBs. I definitely did not. I would travel to everywhere, Cleveland,
Mhm.
Erie all the time, Canada, um, like Hamilton, Toronto, Rochester, Syracuse. Albany was a stretch. If someone like Marauder was playing Albany, I would drive that far, but like New York, that was getting into like the 8 hour territory.
Okay. Yeah, it's
That's a
pretty
little
far.
too far for me. So,
Sure.
if someone looked back on the tour poster, it might have been with Despair and Hatebreed.
Okay.
If not, I don't think Buried Alive ever played there. I think we did not CBGBs in New York. Yeah, I don't know. I
We
don't
um
know.
we played it a couple times, which obviously was just I was over the moon about, historically it was like the coolest thing in the world. The first time I went there, though, I think I think it was the winter of 1992 going into 1993. I'm pretty sure we can fact check that date. But do you remember when Agnostic Front broke up for, I think or they were breaking up for basically the second time? Um, this was when they recorded the Last Warning live record.
Okay.
Um,
First time they break up is right after One Voice. I want to say Roger goes away.
Roger goes away, so they reformed, and then this was the second one. This would have been Madball's first proper show.
Nice.
That wasn't sort of hitched to the other bands, like playing like a small set within a set sort of situation.
Right.
And it was Agnostic Front, Demise, Cold as Life, maybe Marauder, a version of Marauder, maybe. But I went there with Trey, who co-owns Death Wish with me, and this guy, Mike Exchange, who ran Exchange Records. You remember that record label back then?
That I sure do.
Yep. And we hopped in a van and drove overnight, went to that show. I remember I was still in high school. I remember getting back at like, 2 in the morning on Sunday or something insane and still, making my way back after not sleeping for like, 2.5 days and just being immersed in sort of that era of New York. But I was so blown away by that experience and just seeing it and being in it. I felt like I was living and breathing something historic, you know? And
That's some serious hard hitters right there. Holy moly.
it was a weird, dark time for hardcore too, because it wasn't really a genre that was necessarily kicking off at that time, right? That was sort of like the old guard and sort of the newer, harder bands coming up, but there was a distinct division between like uh, a lot of the other stuff that was happening within this sort of larger hardcore community and that stuff. So it felt like I was seeing something just I don't know, just fucking special. I remember seeing Choke walk in with his Slapshot jacket because he was there. And then
Wild.
and then I
That's
saw
wild.
and then I saw him at the I gotta ask him about this at some point. Um, I I saw him at one of the rest stops that are on like 95 or whatever on the way back, standing in line at like McDonald's or something, at like, whatever, in the middle of the night. And I was like, oh man, that's a Slapshot jacket. And I always had like such a reverence for seeing those appear because he would wear one around from time to time, and Mark McKay would wear his often. So you would see them, and it would feel like, whoa, that's one of the guys. It's
I,
crazy.
I I would have to say when I first started going to shows in Buffalo, late 80s, Slapshot shows were possibly the most insane shows. Like they attracted everybody. The worst type of people, always Nazis there, always very out of hand shows, and Slapshot put on such good shows. For Buffalo, they were like top notch.
Yeah. So for Buffalo at that time, or like late 80s, early 90s, who were the Buffalo bands that were making an impact on you and the audience at the time?
Okay, so local Buffalo bands.
Yeah, I mean, or at least at the very least regionally to that, like sort of like, 6 hour hub. So I guess you could say like even like Erie could be part of that too.
Okay,
All the stuff you could basically drive to.
top top of the food chain is Zero Tolerance, no doubt about it.
For sure.
They are the gods, rightful gods, the best, the most influential, the coolest, the best live show.
They were
Um,
cool, man. They played Boston. I saw them play the Channel. Um, I think with like it was one of the POW benefit shows that Sean McNally put on years ago. Like you stack it, it was like Sick of It All and Maelstrom and like 90 other bands. And it was incredible. But like just like seeing a band like Zero Tolerance happen, and I'd be like, where's this band from? From Buffalo. I didn't even know there's hardcore in Buffalo. This is fantastic. Like the world, it was expanding. It was almost as if I was seeing it expand in real time, you know. I was wanting more for that band, but I think they went away before they really kind of got their flowers.
yeah, they're definitely like a what could have been story because they never really got the recording they deserved.
Hmm.
Their live show was just so good, and they had all the connections. Like Brian Foister, who booked all the shows here, was like their man. So he booked everybody. So I'm not on the inside. I'm just assuming he got them shows with everyone. They toured with Shelter. They'd play shows with Sick of It All.
Hmm.
And in my opinion, they could hold their own with anyone live. And, as the story goes with so many people, Snapcase is so influenced by Zero Tolerance. And I don't want to say they got the break. Maybe they worked harder. Maybe they were more organized or whatever happened. They got the break, they got on Victory, and that's the band Buffalo's pretty much known for.
Absolutely.
Uh, so before Snapcase, we've got so when I first get into hardcore, let's call it 1988, we got Zero Tolerance are the kings. Under them would be Solid State, which is Snapcase before they changed their name.
Okay.
Great in
Previous
their own right.
previous singer, obviously, because that first seven had I think Daryl on bass at the time, right? Was that what it was?
Definitely Daryl on bass. Chris Gallus was the singer, and
Okay.
he was phenomenal on
I thought he was.
stage.
I thought he was cool, but it was definitely a different thing when Daryl took over the band. But I liked that early version of the band as well.
Solid State would be more of my peers, but a little bit older and a little bit more in touch with reality as where I was coming from, like just brand fresh to everything.
Sure,
And they were like a band. I'm like, they play, I am moshing. All these bands I'm going to mention, any of these bands play, I'm moshing the whole set, no matter what. We have No Joke. Uh, we have Slugfest is in this crop of bands.
okay,
Um, kind of a joke band named Trainwreck. We've got all of Garrett's bands. Garrett from Texas the Reason. He did Support. He did
oh,
a band
that's
called
right. Oh,
Evergreen. Who am I missing? Discontent is a really good. So Discontent's definitely ZT wannabe, and I don't say that in a derogatory way. We all wanted to
sure.
be Zero Tolerance. The
Everyone
one,
hates something at some point in their trajectory. It's all right.
even Garrett's early band Support, if you listen to the music, it's very Zero Tolerance with his actual singing, which is an awesome thing. Kind of, I don't want to say it's leeway-ish, but
Yeah,
has a leeway feel to it.
sure. I could hear that in the melody a little bit.
Here's a slept on gem of Buffalo, Against All Hope. Now they are not Zero Tolerance wannabe. They are like Dag Nasty, Uniform Choice, and somehow Iron Maiden, a little more punk, amazing. The singer can sing, the coolest people. Uh, Against All Hope, that's a Buffalo gem. So that's
Okay.
that's the summary of the Buffalo scene. I'm sure I'm missing. And then we got the Goo Dolls.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of punk bands, but that's the hardcore scene. Close by, Erie, PA. We've got the early Brothers Keeper, Out of Hand, and then Brothers Keeper, of course.
Sure.
Abnegation, which is a
Yeah.
band everyone should know.
Sure. No, they
Um,
were important. They weren't my thing, but they're an important band, part of the sort of vegan movement, the early heavy metallic vegan movement that was happening.
And you know what? I'm sure they would give it up to zero tolerance. Then we cross the border and get to Hamilton, Ontario. The almighty Chokehold is right there, who
Sure.
Chris Logan, the singer, put out the Slugfest 7 inch. So the first time I was ever on vinyl, it's because of Chris. And then you mentioned Acrid. So there's all these bands like all the Chris Callahan bands, which is cool because
Mhm.
Converge, Terror, and what Chris band
Cursed.
was it?
We all took
Curse, right? We all did a Canadian tour. Chris is
and
a great
Mare. Do you
person.
remember Mare were also a band that were on that tour, Mare.
Yes, 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 yes.
They were wild.
So all of at that time, Hamilton, in my opinion, I could be wrong here. Hamilton was doing a lot more than actually the city of Toronto, but
Okay.
I'm sure a lot of kids from Toronto were coming to Hamilton. There was the House for Zach there, which was a house that kids lived upstairs and turned into a venue where I saw Earth Crisis play, Conviction play, Mayday play.
Oof.
All sorts of bands would play at this house.
Oh,
Uh,
Mayday. Man, people don't talk about Mayday like they should.
you've got a component in your band that's very close to Mayday. So you
Oh, we talk about Mayday all the time. Well, not all the time, but Mayday often comes up. And was it Rod from Mayday?
I
Still
don't
still
know
shook.
the people. I don't know the people. I just
He
knew the split with Integrity.
oh
I think their 10 inch is called the Staple Gun 10 inch. They're
yeah,
really good.
they were cool. They were definitely ahead of their time. There's so many bands that you mentioned in that. Chokehold were really important in New England. They had a social tie where the drummer was dating and I think later married the one of the females that went to shows up here that was pretty active.
Did
Uh,
she do New Bedford Fest? Did she have a tie to New Bedford Fest?
she was one of them that there was three girls that ran New Bedford Fest at the time, and she was one of them. Um, and so that kind of brought chokeholds to this area, or in at least an awareness of chokehold. And I remember the chokehold 7 inch like looking great, but not really like impacting on me. And then they did there was a 12-inch album, and I was like, this is great. And then they got punk. And then they really got me when they kind of started to get a little unhinged towards the end. And kind of almost like a similar trajectory of Unbroken in the sense of just sort of musically finding their way over time and kind of beautifully evolving into something even uglier and cooler. Um,
My relationship with Chokehold's very maybe different than most people because they were coming to shows here very early and I was going to shows there. So even when they were at their worst, when they first started, I was anything my friends did. I didn't care. I
sure.
was so unmusical to me. It had mosh parts, I'm moshing.
Right.
And then Chris put out our 7 inch and they were all, they were so political compared to someone like me.
I found that
I
to be challenging back then because, I also had a similar mentality to you. To me, wasn't necessarily more about moshing as much as I connected with, with the records. But like some of that was some of the first, those were some of the first hardcore bands that were really of that modern era that were, sort of injecting politics into their music in a deeper way. Yeah, that you couldn't escape.
I do believe and always have believed hardcore is about thinking and making the world a better place and things like that and expression. So I was with it, but they were on a different mental plane than me. But there was a time when Chokehold became, and I'm not so much Chris, but the band became like anti mosh, and that was not okay with me. Not
Yeah,
like we had this problem, but like now I'm like, okay, now they're anti mosh, so I kind of gotta back off a little bit, but they're still my friends. I still support them,
understand.
and
Yeah, that's an era in a movement that I don't think is really talked about at all now. where they're, I think that really came from Fugazi more than anybody else. And everybody sort of were taking hints from Fugazi and the more sort of art rooted punk and post-hardcore bands and saying like, no, this is it's about the message, not the physicality. Let's have debates at shows, not necessarily have music at shows. I mean, the you mentioned those New Bedford festivals. I at least believe like one or two of them had moments within the the set times where there was like spoken word slash debate style things that were actually on the schedule.
Uh,
um, that was a
like a
thing.
boxing match at 3 o'clock. We'd have a verbal boxing match.
Basically, yeah, there'd be some sort of argument, and then everybody would kind of come together again for the music. And everybody was just so young, and everyone was just full of opinion, which is not a bad thing. But yeah, it was wild, man. Crazy to think about. But yeah, Chokehold were definitely one of the bands that leaned that way towards the end of their tenure.
I got like 10 things to unpack right here. Can I go off?
Yeah, go off.
Okay. So you bring up Fugazi. My first interaction with this Fugazi is I never saw Minor Threat. Another State of Mind, the movie or documentary, got me into hardcore. And not so much because of the punk side, but because I see Ian and Shaved Heads and their vibe, and I'm into hardcore. My first chance to see Ian in the flesh, Fugazi comes to Buffalo. They walk off stage after like 5 songs because too many people are stage diving.
Hmm.
So I hear so many podcasts and people give so much love and praise to Fugazi. But to me, right there, that was such a turnoff. Like, I get it.
Hmm.
I do not like, I see a fight break out on the street. I'm not pulling out my phone and thinking this is cool. Like, I'm not into violence or people getting hurt at shows or any of that stuff. But when you go that far the other way, you kind of lose me.
Mm.
Um, Now back to the debating thing. Um, Bear with me quick because I'm going to get to
Yeah,
Syracuse.
absolutely.
We did the Canada thing. I want to Rochester had great shows. Moment of Truth was the band there,
Okay.
and lots of great shows in Rochester. But one city down the 90, a 2 hour and 15-minute drive for me was Syracuse, which in the early 90s somehow became, I guess, because of Earth Crisis and John McKegg's organization and just everything he did became like a central point for hardcore.
Lost Horizon was a new CBGBs of the North.
Uh, and it was a perfect venue for shows. You went down those stairs into the pit, you know what you're getting into. And
Hmm.
if you didn't want to be in the pit, you were up a couple steps and you could actually watch the show. And I would go there at least once a month, if not twice a month. And the scene there was so good. They had so many good bands coming there. And not to discount Buffalo. Buffalo was great too. But that was debate central. There were, shows would just stop and
Hmm.
people would start debating in the back of the room. And like just thinking about what would go on a show then with like so many tables, like leaflets, debates,
Sure.
people talking in between songs for 5 minutes, people talking for 5 minutes before their set start. There was so much communication and back and forth and combative talking and teaching and learning and open-mindedness and closed-mindedness and slogans and different factions of hardcore, different styles of dancing. And it's like I'm not discounting what we have today, but what a beautiful place for someone's mind to get molded, to see the world for what it is, and to choose your path on how you're going to be in this world and what's going to be important to you and what's not going to be.
Absolutely. You would go to what you were thinking was going to be a local show as a teenager, and you were just immersed in this whole thing. I mean, sensory overload, like educational overload. It was thrilling, exciting, and also like suffocating all at once. And I know it kept bringing me back. It kept pulling me in just here locally. So yeah, being there and like dude at those old McCaig shows, like that must have been absolutely awesome. I still remember the look, just the look of a McCaig flyer. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, they were the big size, whatever, 11 by 17. They were always black and white. They always had the same fonts, the same look. So you just could spot that out of anywhere.
Anywhere, and it was brilliant in terms of information design. I was just like, man, this is like it trimmed all the fat and it felt exciting. And there really was something exciting happening there at the time, like to each their own, whatever they're into socially, politically, whatever. Like there was some excitement there for sure. What were like I'm sure then you must have been present for like all the early Earth Crisis shows there. Um, yeah, I mean, that must have been fascinating because we didn't really experience that down here for until like I would say like 94, 90, maybe something like that, where like that, like a Earth Crisis Strife tour, I think, something like that. We got to experience the band, but yeah, seeing it there must have been fucking really cool.
I can I
Go ahead.
I can remember Ben Reed, the early guitarist of Earth Crisis, who to this day, in my opinion, up there with Vic DeCara as a guitar player, has in some of the most insane stage presence I've ever seen. Their previous band Framework, which is basically Earth Crisis with a different singer, I had seen them a few times. I never heard the word Earth Crisis. I didn't know what this was, but a kid walked up to me at the show at the Lost Horizon. I can't remember, was playing, and he had a scar, not a scar, but a scab across his whole face, like from his hairline to his mouth or something. And I like to like romanticize this, that he got this from like freeing some animal from a cage or something. I have no idea why I had this cut on his face, but he was just like, "Do you want to buy the 7 inch?" And I'm like, "Sure." So this is the All Out War Earth Crisis 7 inch, and I bought it. I had no idea what I was buying. I took it home and put it on my turntable, and like, I had never heard anything like that. Like the gang vocals being so like off time, and not even gangs, just like one of their friends screaming a backup, and like Carl's voice was insane, and the recording wasn't that great, but the energy, and you look at the lyric sheet and like this dude is saying the craziest but coolest shit in the whole thing. And
Yeah.
this is when I'm in Slugfest, and Tim Redmond, the drummer of Snapcase, uh, since then, who's now still in Snapcase, this was like my moshing partner. Like
Mhm.
all we would do is mosh and do Slugfest. I must have like picked up the phone and been like, "Tim, you're not gonna fucking believe what I just heard on my turntable."
Mm.
And like, I remember the first time Earth Crisis came to Buffalo. This was a show me and my friend Joe Luca booked. So I probably got the 7 inch, immediately called, whatever, "Can you come to Buffalo?" And I was doing a band with Tim, who I just described. We both sang in a band called Cinderblock,
Okay.
which was like wannabe quicksandy, more melodic.
Okay.
Um, so we booked a show that was Shelter, Resurrection, Earth Crisis, Cinderblock, and fuck, I'm gonna let one other band. I don't want to waste time on who it was, but what happened was Earth Crisis came to Buffalo. I might have this wrong. This might not be their first time in Buffalo. I'm just gonna say it is, but I could be wrong. And they brought like 30 kids with them, and the minute they took the stage, all of their friends put like ski masks on and just attacked the pit. So as soon as they start playing, there's like 30 kids that come out from every corner behind the amps and just start fucking going off. And I'm like, this is the way a band is supposed to play a show. All
Mm.
your friends put on some sort of crazy gear and mosh everyone around them. And this is the beauty of hardcore.
Yeah, the tribalism was real. You know, I gotta say, like that first 7 inch, I also had like a real visceral reaction to it. I remember getting it early on as well, like before Firestorm and all that. And it was unhinged.
Yeah, for
Man, it
sure.
was unhinged and I enjoyed it. I didn't necessarily agree with all of the message, but I related to the volatility that was in there and the intensity in there. And I was like, that's fucking power right there. Yeah, and I basically I respected the band from that point on. I remember being at the Middle East downstairs. This is a tangent, but not. And I think I had a like a Earth Crisis patch on something because everyone had patches back then. You just get patches, 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 and it's like 6,000 patches around. And I remember running into Todd, who later formed His Hero Is Gone and then Tragedy. He was living in Boston at the time, and I knew Todd briefly as an acquaintance. We'd see each other in the city. I was, your paths just kind of cross, and he was on the punker end of things, and I was sort of in the middle of everything, right? I had my foot in kind of a little bit of everything because I like that. And I remember he gave me a little bit of grief about my Earth Crisis patch at the time. And I was like, whatever, man. Songs songs are powerful. I dig them. But he wasn't aligned with their mentality. But even back then, it was that early on, just from one 7 inch, it was already polarizing, and it was already I don't know, it was making a wave. I wouldn't call it a rift. I would call it a wave that just definitely challenged the way people thought about things. And, I wasn't on, I didn't have like boots on the ground for youth of today in Connecticut and New York City and like, whatever, like 1987. But I imagine it was of similar intensity when you started to have a new kind of tribalism kind of appear. That was yeah, interesting. We toured with Earth Crisis later on in their career and got along with them well. And I still I know them as acquaintances and respect them to this day. I think as much as we all talk about, or when we talk about how hardcore and metallic hardcore especially sort of has grown in the last 10, 20 years, a lot of people leave out the Earth Crisis component of that, where Earth Crisis occupied the space that Hatebreed later occupied in like the early 2000s in terms of being a gateway band, because they were on the first Ozfest. They were doing things that no other band was getting the invite to do that were coming from this sort of subgenre. So I always felt it to be, I don't know, their importance, I think gets, um, uh, it doesn't get celebrated enough. And I think it's because the message was so polarizing and intense for people. They just like, they just couldn't really handle it. But it took a lot of balls to do a lot of the things that they did and take a lot of the risks that they did. I mean, can you imagine being a metallic hardcore band and being like back then in like 1990, I guess when was that first Ozfest? The one it was before the tour. It was like when they just did it in California and they did like two or three shows. They must have like that must have felt like the top of a like proverbial mountain for them. Must have been like really really wild to experience that. Yeah, total trip, man. Crazy. Um, yeah. So I interrupted you anyway. What were you saying?
I don't know.
Ah,
I'm thinking uh the open-mindedness you said, like I'm I'll go from Split Lip to Stigmata in one song, and then back to Bold, and then I can be all over the map, and I think that's like an awesome thing. I think one thing I want to mention is how insane is it that Earth Crisis still, I feel like they haven't had that many members, but still all vegan straight edge. I think maybe one or two of the ex members isn't straight edge, but still a
Mhm.
vegan straight edge band. That's almost unheard of after fucking 30, 40 years. Um, Also, I think one thing that came to mind when you were talking was as much as Earth Crisis was occupying that space, maybe VOD too was like
Sure. I
a
think
band that
yeah, right about the same time. I think VOD, I think Earth Crisis was just before that, but the hype of VOD when they came out and the impact that they made on the first record before the full length was substantive and real because that felt to me like a new a new New York was happening when VOD happens. Because when I went to that CB show that I described earlier, that at least for in New England, that was kind of like the dark ages of hardcore. A lot of venues were shutting down. Generationally, things were kind of shifting. People were aging out. People weren't coming back in at the same speed as they were aging out. Things were just sort of like not falling apart, but not progressing really that that quickly. So like some of those bands like VOD for example, even like dude, talk about that era of hardcore, the time, that like, place and time or whatever. All like the bands that were happening in Long Island as well. No one really celebrates those aside from Glassjaw, but there was so much stuff happening in Long Island as well, and it was a whole nother world.
silent majority. People love that band.
Loved that bands, and all the bands tied to all of those bands, everybody who's tied to, like the most precious bloods of the world, and like I don't know, like who else did we play with back then? Um, oh, I mean, there's so many of them. But Millhouse, that was another one that was there. Um, uh, Sons of Abraham were a thing. Um, there was just like lots of interesting things happening. You didn't necessarily have to agree with all of it, but like it was such a wild melting pot for I guess the metallic early primordial version of metallic hardcore. Um, yeah, it was fucking nuts. But yeah, we're giving everybody a history lesson on bands that you probably get into, or at least like, give a listen to sort of understand the lineage of a variety of things that are now, in front of us. So I wanted to get into a few things. We got into some of the history of you musically. When did you leave Buffalo?
Okay, so I do Slugfest.
Yeah.
I do Despair.
Yes.
I do
Can
Buried
I can I
Alive.
talk to you about Despair before we move on from Despair?
Sure.
Despair were very impactful for the time. Uh,
Hmm.
everything
I might disagree with you,
I
but
might
go ahead.
you may disagree with me. That's fine, but I'm going to tell you from an outsider's perspective. Despair was presented in such a way that felt important before I even knew what despair was. I remember picking up the Despair CD, the first CD, and going like, this is legitimate. Feels pro. This feels like a fully formed band and idea. And I'm sure it wasn't behind the scenes like every other band, but it felt that way to me. And it was one of the first records to me that that happened outside of the sort of let's call it like the solar system of larger labels, right? So back then, who were the larger labels? It would have been like Rev
EVR?
and EVR and Victory. And Despair happened and was presented in a way that was equal to those releases that were coming out on those labels at the time. And to me, as a person, creating music and art and all that jazz, that was super impactful because it made me look at it and go, oh, I am DIY. I do my things myself. Our band does things ourselves. But I can also do things in a way that feel um, refined and professional as if it was part of that sort of solar system of record labels. So yeah, it felt like it was presented in a way where it was like, no, you need to pay attention to this. This is legitimate. And I don't know, that made an impact on me because I still knew that you were kids like we were, but it was elevated in a way and presented in a way that I don't know, just made an impact on me. Anyway, that was a little side note, but I needed to say that because I just had a thought of that CD cover in my head at the time.
I would have to say 99% of that is Josh Truskill.
Absolutely.
Um, I had no artistic vision. We were just, you saying all that is something I've known all along. So I'll say it, I'll say it out loud.
Hmm.
I wish we could have delivered the record that Josh deserved with the way he was doing his label right off the jump. I don't think we were the wrong band, and I don't think we made a bad record, but the Despair, the record you're talking about is called Pattern Life.
Yeah, it was the
It's
first one.
it's got some good parts. It's got some good lyrics. The recording's kind of bad, but yeah, he was just ahead of the curve, probably from watching a label like Victory go from putting out a 7-inch to getting pretty serious. And he just took himself serious. I don't know if he was doing all the art, or I know he was going to school in Syracuse, so he might have had some.
Yeah, I think he was doing a fair amount of it, and I know he was definitely influenced by what McCaig was doing. It's the same world, in terms of design and presentation of things and making things feel just big. As much as people knock, I want to say people knock Josh because they don't necessarily knock Josh. Josh is Josh. Um, but his label at the time was a super important label. I don't think people understand that now. It might not have been musically, like as you said, like you didn't deliver the album musically and artistically that you necessarily wanted to at the time, or maybe you guys just weren't capable at that time to do it. But it was presented on the other end like it was that, and that was I don't know, it was a cool thing to see because like there was a lot of hype around that record. Um, yeah, how do
Just
you feel about it now?
for me being in a band at that time where he was putting ads in fanzines, he had posters for us that we'd have at shows, or he would give to, stickers, posters, t-shirts, ads and zines. Some people wanted to interview us. It was like that's all you needed. That's all you wanted, or
Hmm.
that's all I wanted. Yeah, and it was great. And maybe it's good that I don't, this isn't the way it was looked at, but maybe were his test run for bands that delivered more powerful records later. And again, I don't think Despair's bad. I just think the opportunity we had and the way he was willing to push us and present everything, our record was pretty good. If it would have been great, maybe we could have done some more things. But
Hmm.
then again, we toured the US with Hatebreed and we went to Europe. Like, what more could we have done? So,
At the time, that was basically that was as high as you could go, right? You want a record that's well distributed, and you want to be able to travel and play your music and get to Europe. If you can get to Europe, you've kind of done all the things that you could do at the time. Um, yeah, I mean that was it was an important record. Yeah, but I've had my differences with Josh, but I've always respected his work ethic and his vision for things. And like I'm glad he seems happy doing things now again. So hats off to him.
I literally just saw him at a terror show in New Jersey, handing out himself paper flyers to kids at the show. So I'll respect that gratefully. Um, so now everything I just said, moving into Buried Alive, now that's where I can say we were on Victory.
Hmm.
I love the layout of the record. Mike Ski from Brothers Keeper did the layout, and it's so outside of the box. If you said to me, hey, I don't think he said anything. I think he just did it. Scott, I'm going to put this girl's distorted face on the cover of your record with some lyrics over it. And it's going to be this weird peach color. I'd have been like, dude, what the fuck are you doing to me?
Hmm.
But when I saw it then and when I still see it, the artwork's amazing. Uh, and we went to Steve Evans and we just and those the people in Buried Alive were maybe a little bit better players than Despair, and
Hmm.
that's where I first had a record that I was like, wow, we made a good fucking record. And still, when I listen back to it, not that I sit around and listen to Buried Alive very often, um, it's just good. It's powerful. It's fast. It's hard hitting. If anything, I would say I'm the weak link on it because I'm so monotone. Like every line delivered it's good, but after 7 songs, you're like, dude, please do something different. But it's just this monotone the whole way through. But that was something that I was like really like, okay, I just did something cool, and that was just like being on Victory, influenced by All Out War, influenced heavily by Hatebreed.
Hmm.
The people in my band, though, influenced by Converge. It's definitely more noisy than I'm accustomed to.
Hmm.
And even the early, because Buried Alive was started without me. Those guys started the band, and I kept saying no. They kept asking me to be the singer or whatever you want to call it, and I kept saying no because I was just like frustrated. Every band I did a little stuff and then broke up, and I was just like no. And but I would like hear them, and I'd be like, this. It's not exactly my type of hardcore, but there is something special here. So we did that.
There was something special, and that's what that pairing is actually what that's what makes the band to me as somebody on the outside perspective, seeing the band and experiencing the band back then. That's what was so cool about it was, as much as you say you're monotone, you're not monotone. You emote at a certain volume, and it's powerful and real. And that paired with music that at times feels a little like it's in little chaotic is actually fantastic because it's breaking from the grid and it adds layers of emotion to things. And as much as you see yourself as the weak link in any of these bands, you're not. It's like again, it's like the pairing is the magic. Um, they have a singer before? Did they even get to that point? Did they demo with anybody else?
I don't think so.
No.
I'm not sure, but I maybe they tried out some people, but I was living with the guitarist Matt Roberts,
Hmm.
so I would hear everything they're doing, and they asked me a few times, and I said no, but then finally I was just like, this shit is good. And I want to mention, I want to reference Turmoil. That was a huge influence
Sure.
on us.
That's a band that we haven't really talked about. If there's a band that didn't get their flowers when they were around, maybe towards the end of their sort of run, they started to. But they were a fantastic band that really, yeah, they were really doing something special. I think at the time they were tied to Century Media. Is that correct? Remember, was that
Yeah,
the?
they were, and I think that probably helped them in Europe, but hurt them over here.
Yeah, they weren't really well known here because Century Media didn't really occupy the same space as they do now here in the States in terms of visibility. The things were just different then. A lot of things were geographically limited. So yeah, you had band like I think that was one of the reasons why like uh, I could be totally off on this, but like why like Only Living Witness uh, signed with Century Media and actually did like I think well there, but had no visibility here.
And
Um,
that's probably why someone like me in Buffalo, I know the name, but I don't know one song. I never saw them.
oh, you
They
missed
they
out on so much.
they probably flew under my radar. If they were on, how crazy is it that I know every word to every Kingpin song, but don't know anything about Only Living Witness?
That's because they lived in completely different universes. That's the thing about Massachusetts. The cross-pollination of bands didn't start until the birth of modern metalcore. Like after Kingpin became Kingpin, right? They went from being like more of a sort of like gruff, slap shot influenced
Really?
hardcore band. Yeah, they weren't like super gruff, but they were closer to meat and potatoes than you would think when they first started.
Huh.
And I think they had what was their band before that? Oh, I'll remember it, the name in a little while. Funny Wagon. They had a band called Funny Wagon. Um,
I thought you were gonna say like Intact or
I
something
know.
like
It
so.
was like, well, it was, yeah, it was just sort of, it was just different. And it was just like, it was just different and skewed young, and it didn't really, but once it became modern, no, I don't want to call it modern because it was modern then. We used to call it like modern hardcore was like the melodic hardcore that was happening at the time. Like once they did that, they very rarely at least from my perspective, didn't really cross-pollinate with like the slap shots and STPs and Sam Black churches of the world and stuff that was like just kind of like playing in to those already sort of determined audiences.
Right.
They had their own sort of thing going on. The style of dancing was different. The mentality, the vibe in the room was entirely different. It was far less violent, but more expressive. It wasn't necessarily political yet, or at least like outwardly political, in terms of like hardcore bands. It was just a different thing. But like the melodious hardcore thing was like a big sort of dividing line here. And you had bands like Third Degree, Said and Done. I'm sure I'm missing many. I mean, there were sort of versions of those bands that exist, or sort of other other versions of bands like that that were happening to like Another Wall in Connecticut. You know, if you
I'm
remember
sure
that.
Temperance and Providence, who I
Temperance,
love.
Temperance and Providence were basically they were Ape and Kingpin.
Yeah, I
And
would
then
love to see Temperance and Kingpin together.
yeah,
Put me in the pit. I'm going in.
those shows probably happened. Uh, Funny story, the I remember one of the twins from Temperance stole my camera at a show.
Nice
And
guy.
yeah, I wanted to get into photography just like anybody else in hardcore and whatever. And I was like, oh, like my father had a camera, and I was like, hey, can I borrow your camera? And he was like, no. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And he let me borrow it. It was like a begrudgingly thing. He let me borrow it, take it to the show. And I'm watching, I believe I was watching Grip play. Remember Grip?
Yeah, more connections to Virginia Beach, I think.
Yes. And I think in Grip had a lot of momentum at the time. They had their new Age 7 inch that came out and it was like a big deal at the time. That's where I met Aaron Edge, who's still
Yep.
around in music.
Good
Uh,
stage presence.
yeah, absolutely. Good performer, good writer, still is a relevant artist doing his thing. And I took I took some pictures and I was like, I just want to watch a show. So I like total clearly learned my lesson then. It's like, oh, I'll just take my carrier bag and just like in my camera bag and just jam it behind this cab, and I'm standing 8 feet from it. It's not a big deal. jam it there. 20 minutes later, gone.
Damn.
I was like, fuck this. I was like, I was just bummed. Fucking poor kid. I don't fucking have shit. Not only don't have money, I'm gonna have to replace this thing that I
Yeah.
can't even
And
afford.
and your dad's gonna say, "I told you so."
Yeah, absolutely. It was a fucking nightmare. And I found out that night that it was one of them. And I remember we were in a convenience store leaving the show, and I saw one of them. I don't know which one it was, and I was like, "Yo, like, you see on my fucking camera?" And he, did the I don't know what you're talking about stuff or whatever. And they're like, their folks left, and it's what it is. But I was like, all right, well, it is what it is. But yeah, I knew I was told that it happened. I knew it was one of them, and still to this day, I know it was one of them. But whatever, we're kids doing stupid shit. I shouldn't have stuck it there, and they shouldn't have been
Stealing
so
people's shit at a show.
stealing people's shit at a show. But yeah, that was an outspoken show, outspoken and grip.
I
Everything.
was thinking when you said earlier we mentioned EVR, uh, Victory and Rev. New Age definitely needs to be on the list of top labels at the time.
Oh, absolutely. New Age change like really changed the game in terms of challenging like early challenger to the sort of victory throne in terms of like having the bands that were the most relevant at the time of their sort of subgenres. Like, and I know Resurrection blew my fucking mind. Blew
Do
my
you,
mind.
do you like the first Lifetime 7 inch? Do you know that with all the fucking hard mosh parts?
It's got the Slayer part.
It's insane. I love it.
It's hard. Ari was in a few bands before that too, wasn't he?
And he played drums in enough.
Yeah, he
Um,
played drums in Enough. I know, and recently that Enough record was reissued by Radio Raheem. Um, yeah,
oh,
I remember that.
that's
Um,
crazy.
yeah, but yeah, yeah, it's wild. I know he was in some bands. Uh, yeah, I mean that record I thought was great. It was very disjointed, but I enjoyed it, and it felt really it felt familiar because the melodic hardcore thing was happening here so intensely. And I remember hearing Lifetime and going, "Wow, if Kingpin just happened 2 years after they happened, Kingpin would be the biggest band in the universe because they were they were such strong songwriters and performers and just players. It was just great, like." I mean, I know it's kind of available now, but that Lost Kingpin record that a lot of people didn't hear for at least a decade or two, man, that thing that was like hearing like the Lost Burn songs.
Yeah, I had the Holding Tomorrow 7 inch, and I had a song on a Suburban Voice
Yeah, the server.
zine. I think the song was called like "Fuck You" or "Fuck Off" or something.
Yeah, it's called Fuck You. It was yeah, it was like a tongue-in-cheek name, I think. Somebody yelled "fuck you" to them at a show, and they kind of like took the piss out of them. Um, you know, I have like such a reverence for that band, but they also make me sad a little bit too. And I'll tell you why. Because, you know, one of the things that I loved about hardcore and punk rock being just a weird misfit kid, just being into stuff and then gravitating towards this community was I loved how fucking inclusive it was. Like I was a fucking kid from a fucked up home trying to find a place in my life, And I found this music and I found this thing and it just resonated with me. And it, for the most part, at least when I was really naive when I got into it, like I saw the intensity, I saw the violence, I saw all that stuff, is what it is. But what really affected me was this sort of high school scenester bullshit. And I was never a cool kid. I was not born to be a cool kid. I never will be a cool kid. But not necessarily that band specifically, but they kind of are a symbol. of that for me, where like a lot of the people around that band and the attitudes that came with that sort of new school mentality of hardcore got very cliquey. And I wanted to be a fan of a variety of things. I wanted to be a fan of fucking Slapshot at the same time I'm a fucking fan of Slayer and Kingpin. And later on down the line, I want to be able to like listen to fucking Cathedral the same day I listen to Fugazi, the same day I fucking, like, I don't know, listen to Amoebics or something. I don't know. And then Starkweather, like whatever. Like I was listening, like but I loved the variety. And when I encountered that cool kid stuff, it happened at those shows. The camera bag getting stolen was an example of that. It was like steal from the fucking poor shitty kid. Doesn't matter. Like that's like what it was. Like, and that continued through a variety of like versions of the scene, but that was my first introduction to that. So I always like, as much as I have such a reverence and respect for that band musically, it like stings for me sometimes thinking about those times. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's definitely the complete antithesis of what this is supposed to be about, turning away anyone instead of, not only bringing them in because they need this just as bad as you or maybe more, but shunning them, making fun of them, making them feel less. Like that's like just exactly what this isn't about. But I mean, the sad truth is it's always been there.
It's
I'm
always
sure
been there.
it's still there.
It's still there, and but I'm 49 years old now. I'm over it, but I'm still affected by it.
Yeah.
But I also never did that to other people, you know. And I've always been like really respectful of that, even if I wasn't like into somebody's style of music or whatever. It's like I never made it personal. And so like that affected me. So like that sort of whole universe like is like a bit tainted for me. Like I went to the Kingpin show because I care about I care about Alex. I've been close with not close, but a friend of uh, Alex Garcia Rivera for a long time who plays drums for that band, and he was actually the person that kind of turned me around a little bit on some of that stuff because he lived behind me in Alston, or I lived behind him, however you see it. When we were uh, when we were like around college age or whatever, and we started to sort of socially connect here and there, and then like we just sort of I don't know, we just became friends over time, and I see him very different than that world, and I always it was funny. I always thought that like he was probably the guy that wasn't like that in that band, but like I definitely felt weird about that universe for a while, but it did birth some fucking great bands and great music. Did you ever get into Arise?
I know the name. I don't know any.
So
I don't have anything.
so Arise they did a few seven they were basically a sister band. If Kingpin was playing, especially later on in their tenure, more than not, you would have Arise or like Nevertheless or something like that playing with them. And Arise were, I mean, uh, they were fantastic. It was total chaos. And they were just such an incredible band to see. I'll send you some Arise stuff so you can kind of hear what they were doing back then. They had a lost record as well. It was a full album that actually started with the Number of the Beast sample from Shout at the Devil or whatever.
Crazy.
Or and it was so weird and cool, and like they were just such the coolest band, and then they just kind of disappeared and went away. I've run into the drummer occasionally. I know some of them still play around in some things. But man, that band was fucking awesome. They had some teeth. They were really cool. Anyway, going down all this fucking memory lane bullshit. Um, yeah, so that's my take on melodic hardcore. But those scenes were so different, right? So like when Kingpin became Kingpin, Slapshot was Slapshot, like those bands never cross-pollinated. And I was a guy that went to a lot of the different shows, like And I love that, you know. I love that I could go see fucking Berserker and then I could go see fucking Third Degree, you know, and it wasn't weird, you know, or at least I thought it was cool at the time. But man, there were so many cool things back then, so many cool bands. All right, I want to get away from that a little bit. We kind of we talk we didn't talk about the demise of Buried Alive, right? No, we didn't really go there. Do you want to talk about that?
Uh, sure. I mean, I quit. I
Yeah.
quit and I moved to California real quick. And
Yeah.
the writing was on the wall. I think just, you know what, honestly, uh, there was a point when I would talk about this from my perspective and say what I thought the other members were thinking and doing in their lives. Now that I've reconnected with them and they've kind of told me their side of the story, I see it differently. But in my head, I just thought the band was getting away from hardcore,
Okay.
and maybe that was just me. Um, and I just we had a tour booked with Death Threat. I didn't want to like screw over Death Threat, but I knew on that tour when it was done, I was going to quit the band and move to California. And I really I don't yeah, I kind of did them dirty. We came home, the tour was over. I was like, I quit and I'm moving. Bye.
I
Or
remember when you did that.
maybe without the bye actually.
Yeah, I do remember that, and I remember seeing you pretty soon after when like right when you were in California, like right when you got there. Actually, I remember more so when I ran into you in I think it was Arizona right as you were starting Terror.
Okay, that's what I actually, on the way to California, I lived with my friend Mark and I stayed there for maybe 6 months and then figured out what I was doing and moved to LA. That's crazy though, because I was only there for a little while. Um,
Yeah, we
and,
played a
and
show and you were out there, and we talked and you're like, I think I'm starting a band.
that, okay, so you must have caught, because my plan was to move out there and never do music again.
Okay,
And then your Bostonite man, John LaCroix,
yeah,
started Terror without ever being in Terror.
that's hilarious.
And here we are 25 years later.
Man, John to used to torture me when we were kids. And you know, I talk about it like, you know, none of it like still sits right with me. But you know, we were kids. We're too similar from geographically maybe 20 minutes from one another. So you're either going to be best friends or mortal enemies. You know, like
Or a
kind of
little
like
bit of both.
or like, well, I just didn't, I never knew him socially, you know, because he was like that well, because he was like, you know, from the town over. But like, I respected him. I respected his hustle and his zine that he was doing, and like the bands he was trying to do. I saw all his early bands. Dude, I think Converge played with Circus Puppies. That was his first band, or one of his first bands. Um, but yeah, then he moved out there to do stuff or whatever. But I feel like in a maybe a different universe, we could have been close. You know what I mean? Just because we had such a similar sort of trajectory in a bunch of ways. But you know, it is what it is. You know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, I think you might have told me that before that he was like the catalyst to starting that band, but never was actually in it. That's wild.
I was living in Arizona, and my girlfriend at the time and I were like, are we going to move to San Diego, LA, San Francisco? So we were just like taking weekend trips. I went to LA and I stayed with Mandel, and Larry from Envy from Buffalo lived with him.
Hmm.
And Larry gave me a tape. And this is kind of like the major Trustkill era, like 2001,
Yeah.
2002, Bleeding Throughs, Throwdown, those bands are huge, 18 Visions. Larry gave me this tape and he's like, I think you're going to love this. And one side was the No Warning 7-inch, who I was familiar with because
Yep.
I met them before I left Buffalo.
What a
And the
record.
other, yes. And the other side was Carry On, a Lifeless Plague, which I had never heard of before. And I was like, this is perfect hardcore. This is like Turning Point with on steroids or something. And so I'm listening to this tape and being like, okay, hardcore's pretty fucking cool. And I just randomly get this call on my answering machine in Arizona, like, this is John LaCroix. I started a band with the guys from Carry On. We heard you're moving to California. Do you want to be the singer? I was like, fuck. I
Mm.
don't want to be in a band, but that Carry On record's so good.
It's so good. They were great, man. I designed the album for them back then, and
I can see that.
when I heard that record, I was like, I'm like, this is great. This is great. They're doing the perfect version of the genre. So I knew that anything that they did post that was going to be pretty fantastic.
Todd's such an animal. What a
Such an
fucking
animal.
music animal. Jesus Christ.
Such an. I was going to get to Todd. I was actually going to get to your friendship and sort of creative partnership with Nick first, but we can go to Todd first since we're at Todd.
I
Um,
I'll go to both of them. So
let's do it.
I drive out to Nick's house. I never met him. I don't know Todd. I don't know Nick. I sort of know LaCroix. I mean, I know LaCroix from Ian Larrabee, but I mean, Buried Alive would play shows with 10-yard fights, but that's a different world, you know?
Mhm.
Um, so I show up. LaCroix never shows up to the first couple practices, so he's out of the band. But I meet Nick and Todd. They're younger than me. I watch them play the songs. I'm like, this drummer smashes his drums fast. Todd's a fucking beast. We hang out. Terror's born. Uh, it's crazy for me to be still like every band I've been in before that, drummer always leaves, which sucks.
Mm.
Getting a new drummer, even if you get a better drummer, it's a different drummer and it
Different
changes.
changes everything.
So to be with Nick still, original member, uh, he's the hardest working, would do anything for anyone. Like, watching him be a dad, he's like the greatest dad in the world. He's just, I mean, if you know Nick, he had his weirdness in the middle that I try to put out of my mind when he got a little crazy, but he is just like this amazing person. And Todd left the band early. I think he just realized touring wasn't for him. And I guess he was smart because Terror tours more than anyone.
Yeah, there's no
Um,
way that I don't think he would have been able to keep up with that pace. You guys run at such a pace. It's inspiring.
it's
It's something.
insane. It's fucking insane. I actually texted Todd today, and as of this starting this, he hasn't texted me back because I know he's in Europe doing like a big
Oh
metal
yeah,
tour. So
he's
I
doing a
just want to,
creator tour, I think.
yeah, I just want to check in with him. Hope he says it's going awesome. But yeah, Todd's always been there through his other bands and stuff. But with the last during the pandemic, when everything stopped, I don't know whose idea this was. I'm going to say it's my idea because it's a brilliant idea, but it
Sure,
could
take
very
credit.
well not be. Me, Nick, and Todd just started getting together again, just like the beginning of Terror, and writing that, not the newest record
The
that's coming out,
previous.
but
Yeah.
Pain into Power. And it was so bizarre. I'd just be driving on the 405 into Granada Hills, a different place, but the same city, town, Granada Hills. I don't know what they call it in California,
Mhm.
uh, where the band started. And I'm like, I'm going to meet with Nick and Todd to write Terror songs 23 years later. How is this even possible?
It's fantastic. Todd is such an incredible songwriter. One of the most talented guitar players that I've ever seen, you know. He told this, I may be paraphrasing, I'll paraphrase it. It might be incorrect, but I think it's correct. During the COVID lockdowns, he would always be able to shred, not but not really shred. You know, he wasn't a solo guy, he was a riff guy. But then he taught himself how to fucking solo during COVID.
Wow. Another tool in the arsenal.
I think that's correct. but there's some more dynamics, just like in what Nails does now, that clearly he was sharpening some things in that time. Yeah, I really appreciate him as a soul being out there making music, doing his thing. And I was so happy for you guys to come together again because I knew you were like socially cool with each other, but like to creatively reconcile like that and still be able to work together in a cool way that like brought some it just brought more life to Terror.
Absolutely. He's got this no, no, like if the riff or the lyric or the delivery does not have intensity, and I don't mean it has to be the hardest thing or heaviest thing, but he just has this intensity filter that it doesn't go through, it doesn't pass, and that's like what you need. And I got two Todd stories.
All right, let's do it.
Pain into Power. So we're writing that, and this is like, if I had an ego, I wouldn't tell people this. The first song on the record, Pain into Power, which is the title of the record, Terror Crew, Tried and True, all that shit that people probably give me credit for. Literally, one day Todd walks in, he goes, I got the first song on the record. I got the whole thing. It's written. I got the lyrics. I got the vocals. And he just writes he must have showed it to Nick. Nick played the drums. They make the guitar and then he demos the vocals. I probably changed like 5 words on the whole thing just because certain words are very strange to me. Like I would never
Sure.
say that. But basically, the first song on that record, I would say Todd's sort of in Terror, but let's just say no one in Terror had anything to do with. He just wrote the whole fucking thing, every ounce of it. And to me, at this point on record 10, please, I'll take any fucking help I can get.
That's, that's it's I'm not surprised because, he is I mean he's such a diverse songwriter. He can do anything. But the way he does write, he has to be a fan of the band and of the style. So him doing Terror, he's not only is he like partially responsible for Terror existing, but I would look at that as a sort of like a love letter to Terror and the idea and mentality of what Terror is. He probably knows what Terror is just as much or if not more than you guys do because he has a perspective of being in and out of the band. So I
For
think that's
sure.
really rad that he did that for you and with you guys. That's fucking awesome.
I can here's story 2, and this one's not as direct, but I can remember when we were writing this newest record, like we'd have intro, verse, chorus, and I'd just be like, all right, right here, we just need the fucking hardest breakdown in the world. And he would just pick up his guitar and like move his fingers a little bit and just like do this and then kind of start figuring it out. And then within like 4 minutes, he's just playing this fucking riff that is the hardest breakdown in the world and just looks at me as like, what do you think of that? I'm like, how the fuck do you do this? Like, where do you just bring this out of nowhere? And that would happen like every session. He just comes up with these parts. Or even on the other aspect, like a fast part, he just starts moving his fucking hands. And I don't really know what he's doing, but I can just hear that it's insanely intense, like he's just got this, like, and when you hang out with him, it's pretty intense too. So you see where it comes from.
Yeah, no, for sure. He plays like he is. He's real. That's
Yeah.
why it's so good, you know?
What a maniac.
Oh, it's fantastic. He is a super powered mutant, and those are what we need around.
Yes.
So, all right, so we took care. I wanted to make sure we spoke about Nick, and I wanted to make sure we spoke about Todd. We kind of talked about Todd coming in as a sort of side songwriter, not member, but I think that was really cool that you were able to do that. Coming to this new record, did he do that with this one as well?
We did. The difference to this one is, and this will open it up because I don't want to leave out Martine, Jordan, or Chris.
Absolutely.
The last record was during lockdown, so people couldn't really travel that much. So it was a lot of it was Jordan because Jordan writes, excuse me, a lot of
Yeah,
stuff for Terror too.
sure.
He was sending riffs through the internet, but he wasn't there on this new record. We were very lucky to rent a house in the desert, whatever, near Joshua Tree, and that's about an hour drive for Todd. So we had three different times when we all went to California, rented this house, lived there, and then Todd would drive after work. But it was all of us in a room. So Todd, I don't want to say he did less on this record, but there
More,
was more people there to give their input, whereas the
sure.
last one was
More of a complete band because of the
right.
situation.
Right. And I know for someone like Jordan, because Jordan really enjoys writing and the whole process of writing a record, it was a little rough on him last time. Like some of the best riffs on Pain and the Power are Jordan's riffs. So I don't want to make it, but he wasn't there to like really give his full impact, which, just COVID bullshit. But this new record, we were all there with Todd there, and yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, so when is the official release date?
The official release date, and I'm looking at my watch. I'm gonna get out of here soon.
Yeah,
For April 24th, I think.
April 24th.
Something like that.
So what do you guys have planned that you haven't that you can talk about? I know you're constantly busy, you're constantly touring, you're constantly doing the thing.
Yeah, we have a fucking 6.5 week tour coming up that starts in Colorado right when the record comes out, late April.
Okay.
With it's a really cool bill, Pain of Truth, End It, and Start Today. And we're gonna get the new record out, play a bunch of shows, and then, if anyone could have guessed it, we're going to Europe in the summer.
Strange. Because because every band goes to Europe in the summer. That's the joke if people don't get it, but we're all in Europe all the time in the
It's
summer.
insane.
I think we've probably spent more time together in Europe than we have in the United States.
Yeah, especially like now in like the last 10 years. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, it's crazy. Well, hopefully our paths will cross because we're doing the thing too in a variety of ways, and we got stuff we've announced, stuff that we haven't. So hopefully, yeah, the Terror and Converge worlds will meet again.
I,
And
I, I want to put something on your plate.
yeah, shoot.
Your illustrious bass player brought up the idea of Terror playing your festival next year. So I don't know how real
Yes,
that is, but that would be really cool.
it's very
Keep
real.
keep us in mind, please.
You are absolutely in mind, and the invitation is always there. Well, you guys are to us, you're sonically different, but we have the same spirit as to how we do things, and we come from the same place. And so we've always related to one another, and I always really appreciated that. And I always want to celebrate that bond and friendship that we have with people, because that's what hardcore should be and what it is. It's a sense of community for all of us. And I really appreciate just knowing you and knowing those guys and the time that we spent together in all versions of Terror, because I've known so many versions of Terror, so many, dude, you've had so many incredible characters in your band.
I
And
know.
yeah.
And the people we've taken on tour, what were we thinking with half of them?
Oh, well, I mean us too, but that's the best part. We just haven't had as many lineup changes though, but like I think we're just fortunate there because most bands do.
Yeah,
Um,
we've been good. We've had
you've been
uh
solid for a while.
just with David Wood to Chris Link in the last since 2009, we've had one lineup change, which is what's that? Fucking 17 years. So that we've been really solid for 17 years, which sounds insane.
It
But
sounds insane, but it's
before that, for about 9 years, there was a lot of shit going on.
there was a lot of folks, and a lot of strong personalities, but like, they all brought something to the table that was needed at the time. And I think like where you guys have settled now, in terms of like just I don't know, you're all great people, good personalities. I
Oh,
light up when I see you guys, you know.
we honestly feel exactly the same. It's very cool. And when we get a chance to play with you, like you said, it's like you could say it's two different worlds, but it's exactly the same world. So it's wonderful.
It's wonderful. Well, I appreciate you and I appreciate your friendship, and I'll let you go because I know you got to get out of here and do your thing.
Thank you for having me, and
Thank you.
hopefully I'll see you soon.
Yeah, we will connect soon. I hope. Yeah, we'll be in Europe too. I think we'll be on some of the things that you are too. So we'll make something happen for sure.
Amen, my friend.
All right, buddy. Well, take care of yourself. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye bye.
All right, bye.